And now we will actually moving on to the content, and the event is dedicated to in fit of Interreg programs for SMEs. Before we are jumping into how this works in practice, I would like to give you a little bit more broader picture on the role of SMEs in the EU policy, in the EU in general, in Interreg in particular. We will also talk about different types of involvement of SMEs in Interreg projects, and after all, we will focus on some of the challenges that SMEs may experience. So to start with, of course, with some definitions. And I'd like to point out that during the event, once we dive into SMEs, we refer to the EU recommendation where the definition of SMEs is provided. So basically, this reads as the SME, the category of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, is made up of enterprises which employ fewer than 250 persons and which have the annual turnover not exceeding 50 million euros or the annual balance sheet not exceeding 43 million euros. Once we talk about the turnover, in other words, this is the sales that the enterprise makes. So in other words, also this is the gross revenues or the gross income or revenues. And when we talk about the balance sheet, this is basically all the assets, the liabilities, and the equities that the owner of the enterprise possesses. Based on this definition from the EU recommendation, there are basically two factors that determine which category the SME falls into. And these are the staff headcount, of course, the number of employees, and another one, this is the turnover and the balance sheet. And here on the slide, you can see the table, which actually shows what is the micro SME, what is the small and medium-sized SME. So basically, you can see that it's less than 250 people, and then the certain amount for the amounts for the turnover and the balance sheet. It's also worth mentioning that there are other definitions of this of SMEs. For example, the EU risk assessment tool Arachne uses different definition for the SME, and they use different classification of SMEs. So they define like large enterprises, small, medium, and small size enterprises. But we are using the one from the EU recommendation. A little bit also about the EU policy on SMEs. And of course, the EU has a well-defined and overarching framework for SMEs, which is called the Small Business Act. The Small Business Act is designed actually to promote the entrepreneurship in the EU, also to ease and to create the favorable conditions and climate for SMEs. The performance framework, the performance review of the SMEs is measured every year, and the tool that is used to report the results of this Small Business Act is the annual report on the European SMEs. If you look at some statistics from this annual report on European SMEs, the latest one available from 2018-2019, there were more than 25 million SMEs in EU28, because we talk about 2018, and out of this, 93% were micro enterprises, micro SMEs, so meaning less than 10 people employed and less than 2 million euros for the balance sheet and the turnover. Here it's worth mentioning that this report focuses on the SMEs that are part of this non-financial business sector. You can see this abbreviation here, NFBS, which is according to the European Statistical Office of the Economic Activities. It excludes the financial sectors and also the education, the public administration, the healthcare. But all in all, this non-financial business sector represents 65% of the EU GDP and 75% of the overall employment of the population. That's why it's very significant. So of course, this data shows something. Shows basically that the SMEs are the backbone of the EU economy. Also, one few words about the employment. If you look how people are employed in different categories of SMEs, so micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, the highest share, 30% would be for micro, so less than 10 people, then 20% would be for small, and 17% for medium-sized enterprises. In this report, also there was the survey which indicated the most pressing problems for the SMEs. Of course, this is for 2018. And we're not talking about the COVID-19 because, of course, this brings extra challenges and significant implications and problems for the SMEs. If you look at this graph, even though in the very bottom, it's in the very bottom, but still it's one of the most pressing challenges for SMEs. This is, of course, the access to finance. The SMEs, by default, they have less favorable conditions to get the finances, to get the funding as compared to the large enterprises. Due to the fact that they might be new at the market, so for example, the startups or young companies, or even though mature SMEs, let's put it like that, they quite often have unfavorable conditions to get the financing, because the banks offer too short maturity period, so the time when the first repayment of the loan has to be done, or for example, the banks require very high collateral conditions, collateral requirements, and the SMEs just physically cannot provide that. Or, for example, they could require also the credit history, but which is really unlikely for a young startup or for the SME to provide if they don't have any. Very much linked to this challenge of the access to finance, this is of course the availability of skilled staff or experienced managers. Because if there is no finances, there are no internal or external possibilities to get the finances. It's very hard to attract the highly skilled professionals and the experts. As you can see also here, so competition might be quite significant for small and medium-sized enterprises. Regulations, finding customers also very much linked to competition. Cost of production of labor. Now I would like to zoom in to SMEs in Interreg. We will start with the results of the survey that we've done yet in 2013, but still we are using this data to show you the perspective of how the participation of SMEs in Interreg projects developed. So as you can see here, so the private sector, including SMEs, so not only SMEs, but private sector as such, was taking approximately 20% of all project beneficiaries in Interreg programs yet in 2013. And once we're talking about private law bodies, so we cover not only SMEs, but also such specific stakeholders, which could be either public or public law governed beneficiaries, and those are Chamber of Commerce or research institutions or even universities or the employees interest groups, etc., etc. And then also not all Interreg programs allow SMEs to be part of their projects. So out of those who allow actual SMEs to participate, you can see here that the share of SMEs as such and share of the private law bodies is higher as compared to the statistics for the Interreg, for all Interreg programs. Let's move on. And now we are going to move to the perspective 2014-2020. And as you know, there was a shift in orientation in the cohesion policy. And of course, very much focus was put on the SMEs. One thematic objective was specifically, or is specifically dedicated for SMEs, and this is PO3, the increase in competitiveness of SMEs. Whereas also SMEs are kind of, three more thematic objectives are indirectly, but still focusing on SMEs, and those are TO1, which is the research, technological development and innovation, TO2, which is ICT, and TO4, which is shift to the low carbon economy. So of course, with the shift, more and more Interreg programs started to involve more private partners and more SMEs. So here, this is the some extract of the data from the PPU, which is the unique collection of Interreg projects, Interreg ENI and EPA projects from 2000. And you can see, if you browse through some statistical data that's available there, in 2007-13, you will find only slightly more than 50 private partners in the whole database. And then if you filter out to the programming period 2014-20, there would be more than 10,000 private partners. Again, not only SMEs, but private partners as such. A little bit more data. Different types of involvement is possible in different Interreg programs for SMEs, as you know that. But of course, majority, so most of them, 97%, they are involved as the project partners, and 3% only as the lead partners. Here's also some of the programs who are the, say, the front runners of involving SMEs and private partners in their projects. Also, in the KPU, you will find in different interactive data maps where you can see, for example, this one, this is the extract of different partnerships that are composed of private partners including. So of course, if you sum up all these numbers, it would be much more than 10,000. But again, this map shows the different partnerships which have the private partners. As you can see here in the central part of Europe, this is the majority partnerships with private partners, especially in the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic. But more or less throughout the whole Europe, you can see that the private partners are increasingly being involved in Interreg programs. Then also we're moving on to 2017, and we've, as a part of our repository project that we sent to all of the Interreg programs, we received only 38 responses, but still it gives a little bit of impression of how the private partners and SMEs are participating in their programs. So as you can see here, the question was, what is the percentage of private beneficiaries in your program? And as you can see below on the lower bar, this is number of programs. Basically, it's not a percentage, but it's a number of programs. So you can see the 10 programs replied that the percentage of the private beneficiaries in their program was 6 to 10%. But of course, there are some programs which are much higher, and of course, at the same hand, much lower percentage of the private partners in their projects. This slide shows this was exactly the question about SMEs. So what was the SMEs participation percentage of the all beneficiaries, not of the private partners, but of overall all beneficiaries. And here you can see that for 60%, the share is still quite low, so it's below 5% for SMEs. And then the question was for the larger enterprises, but it's again just to give you the perspective, very low percentage, basically less than 1% for the large enterprises in Interreg projects. And now I think that it's a good time to move on to different types of involvement of SMEs in Interreg programs. So of course, there are some programs that do not allow SMEs to participate at all, but those that allow, and this is more than half of all Interreg programs, more than 55% actually, some of those that involve is SMEs directly in projects, so where SMEs are the lead partners or the private partners, and some they involve indirectly, so SMEs being providers as external services, or SMEs are involved as the target group of the end user. Once we're talking about direct involvement, there are also, it's not only two types that is possible, so that the SMEs are only private partners or lead partners, but they can also be involved as being entrusted by the public authority to perform a specific task of a general interest, of the public interest. So for example, this is in the Northern Periphery program, or also in the South Baltic program, if I remember correctly. And there are different concepts and different management models, such as project partner-like, and we are going to talk about this a little bit later. This is in the Interreg Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany, Netherlands program. And then also another management model, this is the sub-partners, and this is the concept that comes from the North-West Europe program. And since we are having representatives of the North-West Europe program today with us, I hope Joanna has joined us. I will give you the floor to share a little bit about your experience. Joanna, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So welcome everybody. I was asked to present a bit of our SME involvement, and as Julia rightly said, we have them, for example, as sub-partners. Sub-partners are usually in our program not only SMEs, but partners that don't have the financial capacity to be a full partner. They usually have more a punctual commitment than a full commitment throughout the program implementation. They do report via the responsible partner, so basically they are attached to a specific full partner, and they also have their first level control done via this controller. We have started adding them either in the beginning, but we do add them also throughout the implementation of the program if those are not decided yet. The only limitation that has been a requirement from the member states is that they cannot be more than 50% of the responsible partner, budget-wise. And obviously, for the first level control reason, they need to come from the same country as the responsible partner. So that's how we include them, yeah, as sub-partners in Northwest Europe. And then the second part that we do is basically where we have them receiving something through our partners, and those are our voucher schemes. So basically the partners give something to the SMEs. Usually we are covering external expertise that those SMEs then get. So basically either the partner will buy an external expertise for them, or they will get help from the partners specifically. We are quite involved in state aid with those voucher schemes. And then basically, yeah, we do have two options. The voucher scheme is free to participate for everybody. And they'll be co-financed by the project partners, or the participating partners or recipients of the voucher schemes will have to partially pay for the vouchers, but then those vouchers will be treated as revenues for the project partner that gives away the voucher. Those are the two big options that we have for them. But we do involve them as full partners as well, if that is what they choose to do. That largely depends on the topic of the project.
Thank you very much for this. I have a question, if I may. So these voucher schemes, they are distributed from the project partners to SMEs during the project implementation, right? Yes. Do the project partners need to submit the list of SMEs that they are planning to distribute the vouchers to, or this is happening during the project implementation? It's not known upfront.
We know what they tell us in the application form is that they are planning on doing a voucher scheme. We do ask our project partners that plan on doing a voucher to use an entire work package to take more time and to give them more space to actually develop on this voucher scheme. Sometimes they are already ready to tell us how they're going to select them, what the criteria are. Sometimes it'll say we will develop those criteria in the project and then make the selection of the sub-partners later on. I think we're quite flexible on that approach and see what the project needs.
Okay, clear. Thanks a lot. Are there any questions at this point? Let's have a look. Either in chat on Slido. Anyone? Also, feel free to speak up. Not so much. Okay, then we can move on. And we are moving on to another type of involvement, which is indirect involvement. So here you can see the examples of the possibilities, but again, this is not the exhaustive list. So SMEs can be the providers of some services. Of course, they can provide a feasibility study, or they can be also sponsors of so-called public goods or facilities, like lighthouse, transport corridor, or the meeting jokes and venues in the project. They can be also they can be also part of the project and be associated partners, meaning that they are participating in the project activities, but without any budget from the project. So this is their own financing. And then in the next slide, we can see some of the, let's say, typical activities. Again, non-exhaustive list of what SMEs can do in indirect projects. This is basically, and again, the most obvious one. This is the product and service development, feasibility study. One and the foremost, this is the knowledge transfer, because I think that this is also the key role of SMEs. Testing of the pilot developments, demonstration of new solutions, etc. And now let's move on to the part with the challenges. In one of the surveys performed by us, we've asked Interreg programs, what do they think is the biggest challenge for SMEs to participate in the program? What do you think? I will show you the results of the survey, but what do you think was the biggest challenge? again, from the program's perspective. You can type in your answer in the chat box. Let's see what you think. Everyone sees where the chat is, or someone needs the help? Let's see, is there any answer? My colleagues will help me. Przemek, do you see anything?
Yes, there are already answers.
State aid, okay. Administration pre-financing, time between application, administration burden, staff costs. Okay. Yes. Cash flow, jargon, obviously. Copyright, so basically the intellectual property rights, income that is generated is deducted from support, so this is the revenues, reimbursement and state aid. So all of your answers are basically covered in the, I will show you, here are the results. Quite funnily that the first answer was the top one, the correct one, let's say, so the state aid. I'm not going to talk about state aid now, but we have the dedicated session for that, which we will tackle a little bit later on. Then also, you can see the big block, which makes SMEs sort of reluctant to participate in projects, and those are connected with the administrative procedures, with the time-intensive procedures, and required pre-financing, so everything that you covered in your answers. Pre-financing, again, this is linked. Remember the slide where I showed you the most pressing challenges for SMEs? One of those was access to finance. So of course, as a starting point, the SMEs, they don't really have the costs to do their activities, and whereas participation in Interreg project requires, in most cases, requires pre-financing. Then also the lack of information about among SMEs about EPC, most probably this is on our side, and how we communicate our possibilities to the end users. Public procurement, because this is something that is totally new for SMEs, something that they have to deal with also if in the part of the Interreg project, intellectual property rights and revenues. Yes, on this slide, it's also some few more points. This is the staff costs. Exactly, so different types of calculation, different possibilities to calculate staff costs that program offer. Then the market connected challenges, those that we mentioned already, basically administration and the processes, so reporting, control, different rules that change also from program to program, and sometimes from programming period to programming period. And now we are moving on the reflection of the place of SMEs in the policy objectives for the future. And before we do that, we are going to have a Slido question with you. So grab your phones once again, please, or any devices, and let's have a question here. I have to share my screen, 1 second. And your question is this one. Which future policy objectives, in your opinion, are the most suitable for SMEs a part of PO1? And I have the list, please answer. And I give the floor now to my colleague Bernhard, who will take on. Over to you.
Okay. Do we see also the number of answers here, Julia? Or just the percentages?
Right now, the percentages, unfortunately. But you can see the total number of answers on the top next to the question on the right side. So you can see now 12 people responded.
Okay, and for the time being, it's clearly policy objective 2, the clear winner among the others.
15 people, a little bit more, to have at least half. But I think more or less, okay, 16, 88%. There you go.
Good for having a first overview. So,
yes,
quite good.
Okay, so let's get back to the presentation.
And now maybe we can look. No problem.
Yes, here it is.
I've had a couple, if you could move on to that slide on a couple of reflections on future policy objectives, SME involvement. I think it's quite clear from all the texts related to specific objectives that it's clearly policy objective 1, Smarter Europe, which is the obvious one for SME involvement. An interesting point is also, if you look into the common indicators, that the majority of the common indicators proposed in Annex 1 to ERDF regulation relates to SMEs, to numbers of SMEs seen from various perspectives. Interestingly enough, also in the survey, ranked second was policy objective second, the Greener Europe. And looking into the specific objectives and the simple fact how broad this policy objective is, it's quite clear that role that SMEs could have their place in projects. Because green jobs is, of course, one of the future assets, which is also massively promoted by European Commission now with the European Green Deal. And it's obvious that when you think of, for example, energy efficiency measures for existing building stock or work along the steps in circular economy or even sustainable urban mobility, you can see a lot of niches and options for small and medium-sized enterprises to come into projects. And we will hear also a bit later what I found very interesting in Thiel's presentation is highlighting the role of SMEs for knowledge transfer, which relates, of course, to policy objective 1, but also for me quite strongly to policy objective 2. It's in many cases, it's the SMEs which then actually start to test, to implement new things. When it comes to policy objective 3, more connected to Europe, I could imagine, for example, when you go into mobility and tourism, local mobility, that there might be interesting niches for small and medium-sized enterprises. When coming to more social Europe, SMEs are quite often training providers when it comes to very specific types of training. This can be hands-on trainings or very, let's say, transfer of very specific skills, handicrafts. This is quite often SMEs very active in that field. And finally, when looking into policy objective 5, the Europe closer to citizens, again, there is one of the big buzzwords in there is tourism and cultural heritage. And in particular in these two fields, again, a lot of room for clever, smart SMEs to change things, to support public equivalent actors in work for tourism development, heritage development. Think about when you go, for example, for holidays, which type of company usually takes over the last mile from, let's say, your airport to the final destination you're looking for. It's usually SMEs which might provide, and they are quite often innovative in their solutions. So it's just policy objective 1, Smarter Europe, quite clear. This is the future priority for SMEs, but there are also the 4 others you might consider. And what we have to admit is we didn't name here the Interreg specific objective, better cooperation governance, which is, I would say, mostly dedicated to capacity institution building. So for that specific objective, I would really reckon that there will be a heavy dominance of public actors, but still there could be also, SMEs could form interesting elements when developing projects. So thanks for giving me the option for a brief outlook. I would like to. Which means we are moving on now to our session on management models. It's quite clear that it's not that easy to start off with SMEs. And I'm now really happy that we have 4 representatives from 4 programs who are going to present a bit their approaches and who will then offer room for questions to you. I would gladly welcome Helena from the program Estonia, Latvia. Helena, I hope you are there.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Just briefly, what I like that much is it's a small, for me, you're from a small cross-border program and you simply started working with SMEs. Then we have Johanna. She also presented briefly the model from Northwest Europe. And maybe I would ask one question to you for later, Johanna. It's about which type of activities you would support under voucher schemes, just to make it a bit more concrete. How you're using it in projects. Then I would gladly welcome Bram from Flanders, Netherlands. Hi, Bram. At least you're visible to me on the screen. Thanks. And then I would gladly welcome Till from Germany, Netherlands program. And I would say these, for me, you're a bit of front runners when it comes to SME involvement in cross-border programs. And you share one interesting model, which is the partnership lights, which we will hear later on a bit more. And I think which has met a lot of interest. At least I got a couple of phone calls once we had a presentation on that 2 years ago. People being interested. And before handing over the floor, I was also working for a cross-border program, and I was confronted with a couple of arguments why we never ever can have enterprises in our program. The first one is it's very risky. For me, there is then always the reminder, hey, we are not handing out grants, we are not handing out loans, we are not pre-financing, we are reimbursing money for results delivered. So, and the second point, of course, is that if I recall the time in the cross-border program, also public equivalent or public bodies can be quite risky in programs due to staff rotation, changes of interest, heavy influence of politics. Then the second one is state aid is complicated. I think that's good to have here now people, all these programs we have here, they found a way to deal with it. And another point is de minimis as such is quite an easy way out. And then the one I liked always best is that they might make profit, the enterprises. And a brief reminder, what we want is sustainable projects. That means when it comes to economic projects which are really deeply rooted in economy, that means that in the end, the activities turn into profit. Otherwise, the activity support will not be sustainable. With these introductory words, I would then, if you could move on, Julia, please, to the slide. A brief overview, and maybe Bram, you could briefly start just 2-3 minutes on your approach to SMEs, because we cannot assume that everyone watched the videos we have prepared for you. Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. So just to be sure, what you're asking is like a quick overview over the slides that were in the presentations, maybe. Yeah. So shall I share my screen then with those slides?
Or no, just if you could, along the overview, present a couple of ideas, because your approach, in particular the partnership lights, is a very interesting one, and I found also your challenges mentioned quite interesting one.
Okay. So SME involvement has been very important for us. We try to realize this involvement well via the ways that that were presented that also other programs use, just this sub-partner concept of Northwest Europe, I'm interested in. I think that's something new. I hope to learn more from this today. But the main instrument we have for SME involvement, for realizing that, is this partner-light construct. So in the slides, there was like a scheme on how that works. You have a managing partner that tries to take in those partner-light SMEs during the implementation of the project. Of course, with the largest benefit being that those companies don't have to be involved in this long period of creating the overall project. They are more or less either asked for a specific task. Could you work along with us on this instrument that we need in this phase of the project? Or projects work with sort of calls for proposals, and they can send in innovation projects, for example, for 2 companies or more together. In my presentation, there were some benefits of this method, but also some problems, some things we want to work on. So I think the benefits I kind of mentioned already: no involvement in the preparation, the flexibility, the fact that these SMEs can be supported by the managing party, meaning that although they have to follow the same rules, the managing party can make it a bit simpler for them, can support them in sensitizing them on the rules most applicable for them, where the most risks are. But the disadvantages are, of course, that those administrative requirements remain, and that we found a certain distance between those partner slides and the program, especially in the very large partner light projects that we had. Mostly the Crossroads project. That's a very big project, actually kind of a program within our program, involving by now 200 SMEs. And that means that if ever you have a different interpretation of rules between the managing party within the project and the program, well, then of course you have a problem, because then there may be 50, 80 of those SMEs being informed not perfectly well. So you have to really follow up on those projects. And we are actually thinking of, in the future, managing those projects ourselves, or at least the technical part of it. So yeah, we're trying to make use of what's good and to improve what's better. I think that's kind of a summary of my presentation. Is that what you wanted, Bert?
And could you just quickly, you've mentioned, if I recall correctly, that checking the checking enterprises whether they are in difficulty posed.
Yeah.
If you could briefly explain what it actually means.
Yeah, so that's one of the things where we had problems. At a certain moment, we all realized that this check on enterprises and difficulties is actually not just some words in paper and legislation, but there are actually companies that are, according to the definition, which should be changed, by the way, but that's something we need to call on Europe to do. But well, not all enterprises can consider it to be not in difficulties. So this check to make that to make sure that the managing parties started communicating about this check early enough in their communications with the SMEs. That was very important because, well, we've had SMEs that were that joined a project as a partner light, and then all the way at the end, when we just had to formalize them being a beneficiary, and then we found out, like, oh wait, but this is an enterprise in difficulties. Why has nobody in this project seen this before? Because they've been talking with this SME for months already. They finalized what the company would start to be doing, and we should be here just to press that button as a last and final check. So, well, you are giving away a little bit of the selection of beneficiaries, and that means that you have to make sure that the ones doing this for you do it well.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
You mentioned earlier that yes, by the definition, we are not checking companies younger than 3 years, and when they turn 3 years old, then what then? So I have a question. Do you check being in difficulties during the project then, or is it
No.
we are okay? We are also we check upon decision making basically when we check technical eligibility and this check, but also leads to the subsidy contract. So we are doing this check as well, and later on we are not checking anymore the same.
No, we also don't, because otherwise, well,
this is a huge administrative
you would have to check every day,
all the time.
yeah,
Which, and everything.
Yeah, and that is impossible. But we had situations where the procedure took a bit longer to have a company involved as a partner light, meaning that the company was not 3 years old when the project itself said, okay, green light, you can become a beneficiary, a partner light in our project. But then, well, some questions arose. I don't know. Well, at the moment where we had to formalize this, the company was more than 3 years old, and then, well, but those things are hard. First of all, we need, I think, a change in European legislation and state aid regulation about enterprises and difficulties, because it's really unworkable definition. But meanwhile, I think it's really important to have well, things like that really upfront in the process, and to organize that within the project. They take up this role. Same with some SCOs, can or can't the SME use it? Is it considered a private party or a public party? Like those technical difficult stuff is, well, you have to organize that the project partners do it for you. Otherwise, they get to be Santa Claus, and the Interreg program gets to be the one, well, taking the money away again. That's not good.
Okay. Bram, I would like to mention one word, that because there is sometimes a misconception that this in difficulty comes from GBER regulation. It's not only in the GBER regulation, but it's also enshrined in the ERDF regulation. So not only the SMEs, but all the beneficiaries should be checked for in difficulty. How it's checked? Sure. It's a completely different. Well, there are different practices in Europe. So that's my point.
Yeah. True.
Okay, coming back to the introduction, I would kindly ask Till maybe to say a couple of words. And I have to apologize, Till, I know in your program SMEs can also participate as project partners. This final last minute change in the slides somehow went lost. So just to everyone, in Germany, Netherlands, it's possible as SME to be target group, of course, but also to be project partner as well as partner light. Till, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I shall keep my introduction rather brief because many things that I could say have been said by Bram before. So basically, yeah, we have been involving SME also in the 713 period already, both as partners and partner light. And we continue to do that in the current phase because it just simply works pretty well for us. As I already said in the recorded presentation, in our program, SME are also the main economic drivers as in total numbers for the region, but also, and that's one really important thing for us, as you already said, Bernhard, when it comes to knowledge transfer. We have quite some universities in our program area, and many of them have developed spin-offs and then consecutively joint ventures, even across the borders already, which are very central innovation drivers for our program. So just in short, that's why they are so important for us. We have, as it's stated here, about 1,500 SME currently involved in the program. I received one question beforehand, whether this number is like concerning SMEs that are really partner or partners light in projects, and that is the case. I just got the updated figures, so we have some 600 regular project partners and some 900 whatever partner light in the what we call open projects. Maybe a few sentences about this. It's similar to what Bram described. We have open projects that are set up by a number of core networking partners from the program area, development agencies, larger universities, for example. So basically partners with knowledge of the specific sectors, with knowledge of subsidy programs. They set up a sort of framework project under which specific activities can be carried out by SME. This approach has been very successful for us. Many of the partners that we have currently, or the SMEs that we have currently as partners in the regular projects, have been engaged in one or two of these open projects before, got introduced to our program via these tools, and are now valuable program partners, so to speak. Just scanning through what's here. Basically, when it comes to challenges, of course, it's basically the same as we always have. Like state aid, you have to take care of that. What we generally do is use specific JIBA articles to provide as the sole option for the applicants. So when we agree upon the framework project, it will be said, okay, only a specific sector of companies can apply, and they should apply under a specific given JIBA article. We sometimes do use de minimis, but it's sort of a last resort for us. We prefer to have them under the JIBA articles. Also to avoid this profit approach. The biggest challenge for us is, Helena?
There's a question from Bram as well.
Why the de minimis is the last resort? Like why not the first choice?
Yeah, it's basically one issue is that some of our program partners are concerned about the companies making profit. So we always say like, okay, under a GBER article, they will only get a subsidy of amount X, like 50, 60% or so, which prevents profit as a first step. Secondly, in both our countries, Germany and the Netherlands, we do not have a centralized register for de minimis grants. So we always have to rely on a self-declaration by the partners, and that's why we are a little reluctant using that. But they can do it if there is no other option. Okay, Bram, you had a question?
Yes, there was a question from Bram, and I would like to invite the others as well. You can ask questions to the presenters, so don't hesitate. So Bram.
Thank you, Till. I was triggered by what's in the table here, the financial capacity. You see that as one of the main challenges from the management perspective. Is that they're talking about their capacity to pre-finance their operations. You had companies that, well, that just had liquidity problems.
Yeah, good point. That's basically our approach towards this whole undertaking difficulties situation, that we do check at least the regular partners, and especially when they are very, very vital for a project success, for their financial capacity to really pre-finance the cost that they have, because we only pay reimbursements after the costs occurred, no pre-financing. And also that they, like, their balances look in a way that they can sort of sustain through the whole project, because we do not want like really important core SME partners to suddenly drop out of the project because of bankruptcies and stuff. So that's why we do some key figure checks for the crucial partners, at least. We do not do that for the partner slide, just because they will only get their money in general once they have achieved the results and occurred the costs. So at the moment when we would pay them, we would be on the safe side because everything has been achieved already. But yeah, for the regular partners, sometimes it's quite important for us to assure that they can carry on through the project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but can I ask a follow-up question? It seems very logical, but how do you consider like a regular project partner / SME to be vital and or not to be vital, and how do you explain that to this SME that they are being checked on something that another one is not being checked on? Does that mean that sometimes SMEs just can't participate because of this check?
Honestly, as far as I'm informed, I'm not really into the day-to-day check of this. As far as I'm informed, we did not reject any partners based on that so far. How do we decide whether it's vital or not? That's basically in the application, or when we give advice to the projects during application process. It's pretty straightforward to see, like, okay, we have specific partners that are absolutely essential for the project, and others where, in case of them dropping out or whatever, the task could be taken over by other partners, or the partner could be substituted. Maybe talking about experience, I think so far in the running program we had 6 or 7 partners like really running into financial difficulties. One of them actually was an essential partner, and despite checks being done beforehand, yeah, it's like always a little bit of guessing involved there. They ran into trouble before the project was finalized, and that did deliver some difficulties because it was really hard to find a new partner to substitute for these specific activities. This is, for us, it's really important to define that. But yes, I agree, it's not easy to always really clearly define whether the partner is essential or not. But as I think, oh my God, someone said it already, that this is not an accurate science or so when it comes to judging whether undertakings might run into difficulties or not. It's more, fortune telling, maybe.
Thank you.
I've seen that Julia raised her hand.
Yes, thanks. We have a question from Slido, and the question is from Slovenia-Austria program. The first one is, what are the legal requirements for project partner lights to join a project? For example, partnership agreement. And I think that this is both to come and to keep. Please.
Could you present, Julia, could you move to one of the slides following, which present the chart?
Yes.
Just because then we have the model as a picture and maybe that makes it easier.
Yes.
That's the example from Flanders, Netherlands. So don't forget to unmute, Bram, or...
Yes. But the question was, what are the legal requirements?
Yes.
Well,
what are the maybe any special legal requirements? Maybe that they would like to clarify, or
no. A partner light has the same. There are the same legal requirements as any beneficiary extra, and of course the ones that are most important to check on is, well, just to be sure their private status, because if it's a public body, sometimes what seems to be an SME is actually to be considered public for public procurement laws. That's one we check, and of course enterprises in difficulties, whether also for some SMEs, whether it's even a private law body or just a natural person. We've also come to that conclusion that there's no legal entity asking to be a beneficiary. But these are, well, checks that should be done anyhow for any beneficiary. But of course, well, nobody, if the provincial government asks for money, nobody will check, is this really a public law body? And these things are more important to check if you have a whole range of SMEs, sometimes not so well known. Maybe till there's some, but we don't have any more legal requirements.
I think there is still a sub question. Do this project partner light sign a partnership agreement?
Yes. Can I explain my question, please?
Please, yes, of course.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's today from Maribor, from the program Slovenia-Austria, and we are interested in the partner slide. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The question is how these project lights are included in the project partnership. Does they sign any partnership agreements, or they are also involved in the subsidy contract with the lead partner and the managing authority and such things? That is interesting me. If you can answer me, please.
We have a standard agreement for the partner slides to sign, but that's just bilateral between the managing party within that project and the project partner light. but it's otherwise, if we would have a direct agreement with Partner Slide, it would be so much paperwork, and that's not necessary.
So if I understand right, there is an agreement between the lead partner and the partner light, and this is enough to include the partner light in the partnership.
Yes. Yeah.
And no other project partners have to agree with this project partner, or is there something that they have to agree with or not?
Well, so for us, every project that wants to use this method, so they mention it in their application. That means that we ask for them to develop a methodology to incorporate those partner slides within the project. That methodology, they can develop it during the project, but that regulation has to be agreed on by me, by the joint secretariat. And in that regulation, they stipulate towards anybody interested to become a partner light. How can you apply for this, and in what way will there be the selection and within the project? So in some cases, the project itself says, okay, just an agreement with the lead partner. In some cases, that agreement with the lead partner can only be done after the whole regular partnership agrees on. But those are things that the projects decide on by themselves. And we just check whether that methodology covers all the things that we wanted to cover.
Thank you very much for the answer.
Just a brief intervention from my side. Our plan is to develop kind of a fact sheet presenting this model, because we are aware that it's quite of interest, and I will then ask also Bram and Till how we could maybe support it with information from you as practitioners to develop maybe 2 or 3 pages how the model works and what are the major provisions partners have to set up. Maybe, Julia, we could move on to the slide, because we've received also a couple of questions in advance. And I think you've summarized these continue along these lines. So the first set of questions was directed to Germany, Netherlands. Till, may I kindly ask you to go?
Of course. Yeah, I'll just go through the questions one by one. First, how to manage the budget construction. When we talk about the open projects, they generally have a very standardized approach towards the sub-projects, as we call them generally. So the specific activities that are carried out by, for example, the SME. That means that there is a standardized budget for each activity. And then the rest is a little bit of forecasting during the general project application as to how many of these activities, these sub-projects, are to be expected. So for example, a framework project could, for example, consist of, as I wrote somewhere in this graph, of, for example, a feasibility study and then a research project, like these 2 activities. And in the general application, it would be stated that a consortium of SME could receive up to 5,000 euros for a feasibility study and up to whatever, like 50,000 euros for a research project. And then the core partners would try to estimate, okay, we expect to have 20 feasibility studies and 10 research projects during the whole course of the framework project. And that would be the budget that's planned for these activities then. Does that somewhat answer the question? I don't know who put that forward.
So to summarize it, the MC agrees that the project has a certain financial volume, which means given that the activities are pre-standardized, that gives you an outlook on the actual numbers of SMEs which might be involved at the end. And yes, quite clear, you don't use financial instruments, but it's the usual grant given for pre-standardized activities. And the framework clearly sets out which type of activities can be financed, and in brackets under which article of GBER you can do so. So it's quite, as I understood, your model includes quite concise instructions what is offered in the end by the project to SMEs. This is how I understood it.
Exactly.
Okay, then there has been a couple of other questions. Could we move back? There was the question on consultants declared as SMEs, and maybe if you could say a few words on intellectual property, how you tackle that.
Yeah, basically, it's a bit when we talk about who can show up as an SME in the projects. It's a bit like Bram said. It's basically as long as they are somewhat legal business entities, they can be partner or partner-lite in a project. So that also counts for consultants. I get the question right. If I'm totally screwing it up, please let me know. When it comes to patents and IP, well, what we do have when it comes to partnership agreements, we have a standardized template for the general project that has to be signed by the core partners that carry out the overall management of the project. But there it's only stated that they have to agree upon the treatment of patents and IP. And the specific regulations are for a given open project are always agreed upon by the core partners with the partners like them. And that's pretty handy for us because generally the institutions that we have as central managing core partners in the open projects have much more knowledge about these issues than we do, to be honest.
Okay, I think we can move on to the questions directed to Bram, which is, I think, don't forget to unmute Bram.
Yes.
It's
Thank you. The first question, to be honest, because I saw the questions before, of course, and I can't recount mentioning this. We have had, of course, a lot the question from SMEs: is there pre-financing possible? In the current crisis, we are afraid that more companies will really need pre-financing to get involved as an SME or to stay on board. But, well, there's nothing we're doing at the moment because of COVID-19 crisis in sense of pre-financing. I really would like to create possibilities for that, but well, I'm not the one whose wallet it's about. So at this moment, I never got our program partners to agree on pre-financing, also not during the current crisis. So we're not doing that. So this question is hard to answer further on. Then the question, do you use in the program financial instruments for the partner slide? Financial instruments in the sense of loans and things like that, we do not use. It's all the same kind of subsidies as normal beneficiaries get for the partner slide. But it's, well, there are different standardized ways. I still also was saying, I think it's really important if you want to have this partner light construct to work on a few useful standardized methods for selecting the partner slides, to check things. And you could also work on different standardized ways of financing them. But we are just using subsidies as for other regular partners.
Yes, and this last two questions, sorry, this is my mistake. This is the questions to Helena, actually. So Helena, if you will take over, please.
Yeah, the annex state aid about state aid is not specially for SMEs. This is for everybody, but we have really elaborated, listed all the possible articles that the program is using. For example, we have also priority separately for development of network of small harbors, where we have different types of entities owning harbors and developing, and not only SMEs. So for example, for them there is Article 55, but others for SMEs are also listed there. So basically all the basic rules and specifically articles. Then what do we do in case GR and de minimis overlapping? We have done everything to avoid it from the beginning, meaning if the beneficiary is requesting both de minimis and GBAR, and let's say also support for activities under different articles of GBAR, then we are using harmonized electronic monitoring system in EMS. They just need to insert separately, like one SME, one legal entity submits different partners in EMS. So partner, let's say company X, GBAR Article 20, company X, GBAR Article 25, and SME X de minimis. So by this we are avoiding that activities are overlapping. They just need to keep separately already from the beginning. So in the application form there are, let's say there are 2 SMEs actually participating, but there can be 4 partners actually, and also they are reporting them accordingly. So they can't really support, for example, Article 55, you can't support, or 25, you can't support just general project management. So they are using de minimis for that, for example. And
Helena, one more question.
Yeah.
One more question regarding agricultural block exemption regulation. I saw in your presentation that you also had some projects under ABER.
Yeah.
Did you have many projects?
We have one. I think in the idea phase and maybe potentially applicants, we had more, but we have actually one, and the activities are supported. I think it was ABR, not agricultural de minimis. So their activity in the project qualified as agricultural. But we are really scrutinizing before actual submission, during the consultation, but also after they submit, that really which article suits the best and what is the type of the company, but actually not only the type, but what counts is the activity in the project. So we are consulting much the expert in our Ministry of Finance, so to get it right. But yeah, we have one partner in one project. But the possibility is actually there. We can have also agricultural de minimis and agricultural block exemption regulation.
Thank you, Helena. Now I think that we have the follow-up question from Maria from Mediterranean Program. So over to you, Maria. Just unmute yourself, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you. It was just a question to Bram because I posed this question about the financial instruments. In fact, I did not understand when he was referring to the Crossroad project that is the program, a kind of program within the program. So how do you settle this in practice?
I think you need to repeat the question because there was some problem with understanding you, Maria. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I will stop the video because I think it is the connection. So
okay.
My question was to Bram, and in regards to project, it was mentioned by that it was a kind of.
Sorry, Maria?
Yes. Can you hear me?
It's again somehow. Now I hear you clearly again, but when
maybe it's best to put in chat when it's.
Yeah, maybe it will be easier, Maria, because when you start asking the question, we cannot understand the question. When you are speaking, we can understand you. Well,
okay,
it's yeah. In the meantime, I saw that there is another question in the Slido, which still treats the costs of SMEs and consultants declared as SMEs. Do you have some recommendations from Competition Council? Sometimes it is avoiding public procurement procedure. So how do you treat that? This is an open question to all of you, also to Johanna and to Bram and to Till, because I know that it was, you know, constantly repeated question. Sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, maybe I just say something because it was on my question slide. Yes, of course, it's a difficult issue to properly judge whether it's done to avoid public procurement. We did not have any real issues with that so far. Maybe when it comes to risk management as a feedback, we did not have any trouble, irregularities, findings by the competition or so on that so far. Because the yeah, it's really hard to explain. We have the if a consultant is a vital or partner in the project and is willing to really interact as a project partner, we judge that completely differently than if it just develops or just delivers one service. So I do not know if we had any issues where during application of a SME or whatever project there was any consultancy activity that was judged as rather an external expertise. So I understand the question. I believe it's difficult. Yeah, but in the end, we did not have any problem with that so far.
For our program, it's kind of the same. Well, first of all, if a consultant is part of a project, that means that they can only reimburse their actual costs. You can't send a reimbursement to an Interreg program for profit on our actual hours that we spent on this work. And second of all, there's their own contribution. So to be honest, I haven't seen it that often that a consultant would participate as a partner, because if they are a contractor, they will get more money. They will actually be able to make profit on it instead of reimbursement for only their actual costs. We had situations where an organization first was a project partner, but for some reason they couldn't stay on anymore because of regulations, because we said you cannot get this amount of public funding because of GBER regulation, for example. And then suddenly they popped up after a procurement, doing the job as an external contractor. And that's, of course, a red flag, because then they have information, etc. But I see, okay.
Yes.
That was that question. I see Maria has a question now on.
Would you please read it out loud just so everyone hears if someone has no access to chat?
So the question to Bram is, how did you settle in practice the Crossroad project to which you referred as a program within the program? This project undertook innovation projects of a great number of SMEs. One consortium has been given subsidy to involve all these SMEs. So it goes pretty much back to the construction of the open project or the partnership light.
Yeah. Well, and it's not so much, well, it depends on what you consider a consortium. We have projects that are really a consortium of knowledge institutes, universities, companies that start working on, for example, this smart tooling project that was in my presentation. They start working on a specific kind of knowledge building and product development. And then they involve those SMEs because they know at some point we will need innovative solutions for the bigger problems that we see in a technical way, in that case, for maintenance of chemical plants. In the case of Crossroads, that's really intermediary bodies. So, well, regional development agencies that already fund within their own region innovation projects, and that came to the conclusion there is a need for cross-border innovation linkages between SMEs, because then they broaden their horizon and they can. So in that case, in the case of Crossroads, it's really a catch-all innovation project. Nobody of the regular partners has any deep knowledge on bioeconomy, nanotechnology, or whatever. They just have knowledge of the needs in their regions. They have a good context with the companies, with small companies, and they bring them together. They do matchmaking across the border. So this company working on nanotechnology can find a good partner across the border that it can't find in their own region. And in that case, it's a program within the program, in the sense that it's really just a general subsidies program.
And just a question, Bram, because you've mentioned that these are intermediary bodies, which is a legal definition. Did you mean it, or did you mean intermediate agencies, interlocutors in that sense?
I meant it in that sense. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word because it has a,
And I think we have to come to an end, but I take home that we really should have a fact sheet on this, on the model by Flanders, Netherlands, and Germany, Netherlands. But what I would really like, maybe Johanna, could you just briefly say a few more words on your sub-partner model in Northwest Europe? Because that has met interest, and maybe one example how you're using the voucher scheme in Northwest Europe, because we didn't yet touch the more practical aspects of these two models. Johannes?
Okay, but those are, I mean, they're in theory two different things. We're involving the SMEs as sub-partners, as many other partners. You know, it's not only the SMEs that become sub-partners, but really the difference to our normal partners is this punctual coming in. I think we're not too far away of the concept of partner light. I think we just give it a different name. Maybe we deal with it a bit differently, because for us, there has to be an agreement between the partner that they're connected to and the sub-partner, but we don't have them sign the official partnership agreement, for example. So we leave this more to the responsibility of the partner they're attached to. You've asked earlier for an example of one of our voucher schemes. One of our projects, for example, is dealing with the problem that there's no affordable housing space in big cities. So what they're pushing is this concept of community land trusts, which is something that is in the UK, something that is very much further developed. So what we're doing with the voucher schemes in that sense is that the voucher schemes that we have contribute directly to the main goal of the project. So here the goal is to have more affordable housing in big cities via those community land trusts. So what we do is we help setting those up, and we give vouchers away, for example, for legal expertise, or that other partners donate that are way more experienced in this idea, donate their time as a voucher to a new community land trust that is supposed to be built up. So usually they are all working in the same concepts. We're giving away either the time or the facilities, for example. Maybe a partner has a testing facility in a different project that usually only for a charge could be used. So a voucher could be the free access to a facility. It could be that a partner is paying for any expertise, basically, that the partners are needed. But I think what we want to do is with those vouchers, they need to contribute directly to the main goal that the project has. That's why they're getting as well an entire work package in order to give us more information on how they're planning on doing it and so on.
Thanks a lot, Johanna. Okay, Bram, the very last question, because we are running very late.
Just very short, maybe the answer could also be after the break or something. But Johanna, of the things you've heard from me or Till, are there things that are really different with the sub-partner scheme? Is it really just another name for the same concept, or are there things that you're saying like, okay, but this is really different in the way we approach it?
I think the difference is the management, because we do give the responsibility to manage the sub-partner to the partner that they're attached to. All the reporting goes through that partner. So I think it is a bit that the partner that is a full partner is fully responsible in the project for the specific sub-partner. So the sub-partner has no legal agreement as such with the partner, with the lead partner, sorry. So they, they don't sign the partnership agreement. The only thing that we ask is that they are attached to a partner from the same region, or even, to the same first level control system. Because those partners will share a first level controller, we need to have them come normally from the same from the same country. In Belgium, it would actually be from the same region. So this is maybe the only thing that I could see where we're a bit different in how we manage it. But from what I've seen, it sounds really familiar. Maybe the devil is in the detail on how they report then later on in the EMS and all of that. but I do see myself in what you explained to a big part.
Okay, so big thanks to Helena, Johanna, Bram, and Till. And what we will try from Interact is develop a fact sheet which summarizes these models presented and tries to give as much detail as required if you want to consider it, as if other programs would like to consider to use these models in post-2020. So with these words, I've seen that there is a lot of interest. I would gladly hand over to Julia for an overview on the SCOs.
We are running a little bit late according to our schedule, and I'd like to propose that we will have the session on SCOs a little bit extended, so to cover 15 minutes of our planned lunch, so to have it until 12 a.m. if it's okay for all of you, and then we will have the lunch for 15 minutes if it's also fine with everyone of you. So to shorten the break from half an hour to 15 minutes. Will it be fine? Just nod or say yes in the chat so we see your reaction. Fine-ish? Okay. Yes, let me see. Fine, good. Thanks for that. So let's move on with the SCOs. So as you know, there are many different simplification measures that programs are trying to deploy in order to engage more and more SMEs. And one of those simplification measures, these are SCOs. There are different ways how to establish SCOs and how to run them in the programs. And if I summarize it very briefly, there are three basic approaches. So one is to use the so-called off-the-shelf SCOs. These are those that are offered in the regulations. The program just needs to take it from the regulations and implement. The legal certainty is there, and there is no need to develop any calculation methods, etc. Another way to approach simplified cost options, this is to develop program-own specific simplified cost option. So this requires a little bit more work from the program side. Of course, the proper development of the calculation method, which should be either based on the fair, equitable, and verifiable method or based on the chart budget. And the third way to approach simplified cost options is the possibility to so-called copy-pasting the simplified cost options from other union policies. And this is according to Article 67.5a of Common Provision Regulations. Why this approach is interesting, copy-pasting, is the logic behind is that there is no need to develop, to reinvent the wheel, but if the simplified cost option is used in other programs, or is used not only in ESIF, but also in, for example, centrally managed programs by the Commission, so from Horizon 2020 or COSMO or any other financial instrument, it is possible to implement it in other programs. There are certain conditions that have to be met when doing this copy-pasting. So first and foremost, the simplified cost option has to be used for the similar type of projects and beneficiaries. This is the requirement for this programming period, 14-20. And in the post-2020, it's simplified and narrowed down only to similar type of projects. So not beneficiaries, but projects. Again, the similarity, it's not equal, but still the managing authority will have to provide the justification for the sake of audits, for the sake of future verifications, where was this linking points, where the similarity was found. Once copy-pasting simplified cost options, the method has to be copy-pasted in full. So for example, if we talk about the lump sum or the flat rate, it's not only the percentage, it's not only the amount of the lump sum itself, but also the everything that stands behind the final percentages and numbers. So for example, the methodology itself has to be copy-pasted. And then linked to this, this is the requirement to check for the updates of the source method. So whenever there are any changes in the amount of the lump sum, for example, or in the amount of the percentage for the flat rate, it has to be updated accordingly. So this is the requirement. And now in this brief session, I'd like to focus on some simplified cost options from other union policies that could potentially be used in Interreg programs. We will have a look at SCOs that are developed in Horizon 2020. We will also have a very brief overview of SCOs that are used in mainstream programs from ERDF and Cohesion Fund, so ERDF, CF, SCOs network practitioners. And then last but not least, in the end, we will have the practical example of Interreg program using copy-pasted SCOs from Horizon 2020. So we start with SCOs in the age 2020, Horizon 2020. You all know that this is the biggest research flagship project of the Commission. And actually, if you have a look, they use all three types of SCOs. So the flat rates, lump sums, and the unit costs. When you talk about the flat rate, here you see that they use indirect costs, which are, so they use the flat rate of up to 25% of direct costs to calculate indirect costs, so officer administration. This flat rate can be found in the regulations. This is Article 68(1) ACPR, but this is, even though it can be found in regulations, it's not the off-the-shelf option as such, because still for this option, the managing authority has to provide the calculation methodology. So it has to be either based on the FIRE equivalent verifiable method or based on the draft budget. So not as simple as with, for example, other flat rates that are to be found in the regulations. Another type, this is the lump sums, and we will focus on these two types of lump sums on the slides later on. And the third is the unit costs. So basically they have the unit cost for direct personal cost of SMEs owners or natural persons that do not receive salary. By multiplying this unit cost with the number of hours worked, you receive this cost. And this is exactly the copy-pasted option that is successfully implemented now in the Interreg program, Belgium, Netherlands, and we'll hear a little bit later about the experience with it. So the lump sums. As I said, Horizon 2020, they use two types of lump sums, and one is the so-called EIC accelerator, which is Enhanced Innovation Council Accelerator. The point of this specific project is to provide financing to highly risky and highly innovative breakthrough innovations. The eligible beneficiaries for this lump sum, for this type of financing, those are SMEs and young companies, including startups that are coming from the program partner, from the Horizon 2020 partner countries. For the project as such is built in stages. The first stage, this is the so-called the starting phase, and this is exactly where the lump sum can be found. So they provide the lump sum of 50,000 euros for the specific activities with the aim of developing the feasibility study, including business plan. So as you know, the lump sum is normally used when a single output can be defined. And this is exactly the case of this lump sum, because after the end of this project phase, they're expecting to have the feasibility study and the business plan delivered. They also provide the examples of the activities that can be covered in this lump sum, and this is the risk assessment, for example, partner search, analysis of regulatory framework, intellectual property management, etc. The next stages of these projects, they are provided to different types of financing, the financial instruments. That's not something that we are interested in now in particular. But again, this type of the lump sum covers the preparation, let's say, cost and the development of the feasibility study. And this part is also not obligatory, so it's possible to apply directly to the second stage, so skipping out the feasibility study stage. And the second type of lump sums that are used in Horizon 2020, this is the so-called lump sum pilot. There are two options for this. So either to have the whole project as the lump sum. In this type of lump sums, the amount is defined by the program. The program also specifies the specific outputs that they want to see after the project is finalized. They also list all the activities that are that need to be delivered by the project partnership. So this type of lump sum, this is very much similar as, for example, our preparation costs, but in a bigger scale. And another type of the lump sum, this is basically a similar concept. The only difference is that the lump sum has to be proposed by the project partnership themselves. So the applicants, they deliver the detailed budget, which is split per budget line, so for cost categories that are eligible in the Horizon 2020. Interestingly, part is that for the indirect costs, they can use this flat rate of up to 25% of direct costs to calculate office administration, the flat rate that I presented in the very beginning of this intervention. And then, they present basically the real costs, the budget, they provide justifications for all the costs that they include in their budget. And then based on this, the program establishes the lump sum. So if you think about this method, this is very much similar to what we know as the draft budget method, and which is also one of the methods to calculate simplified cost options, which was added to the regulations by the Omnibus update. Are there any questions here? Not. And then we will move on to second part of SCOs, and these are some simplified cost options that can be found in the mainstream programs that are part of the ERDF and CF, so Regional Fund and the Cohesion Fund. Again, here you can see that different member states use different simplified cost options that are designed for SMEs. There are lump sums, unit costs, and flat rates. For your information, also, this ERDF CF SCOs practitioners network, they are also they can be found on the dedicated part of the Interreg Belgium website, and there you can also find the map of all simplified cost options that are used in all member states. This is a very unique collection, and we published it there recently. So these are SCOs not only connected to SMEs, but in general, the whole list of SCOs used in different member states. Very interesting indeed. Let's have a look at some examples of the flat rates that are eligible to be used or can be used for SMEs. First one, this is exactly the one that is used in Horizon 2020, so up to 25% of direct costs for indirect costs. Another one, this is very much known to all Interreg programs. This is 15% of direct staff costs to calculate office administration. I think almost every Interreg program is using that. And another flat rate, this is basically the copy-paste of the flat rate from the national level, which is used in Austria. Here you can see that these flat rates are normally applied in types of projects, which are about innovation, enterprise development grants, and LDI. And it's mainly used in mathematical objective 1, which is research and LDI basically. Next one, this is examples of the lump sums that are developed for SMEs. Here you can see as the very last bullet point some cases. For example, the amount of 54,000 euros as operational cost of startups. And this lump sum has defined milestones, so it means that once the milestone is delivered, then the certain percent or certain amount of the total lump sum is paid. Another interesting example, this is delivery of feasibility studies, as you see, very similar to Horizon 2020 lump sum, but a different amount. And for example, a lump sum for participation at the fair. These are all examples from Slovenia of lump sums. Calculation method is very different. As you can see, they use the program historic data to establish the amount of the lump sum. Of course, here you need to justify why exactly that amount is put on as amount of the lump sum, fair, equitable, and verifiable method, and the draft budget itself. And the last but not least, these are the unit costs. Can be found mostly in thematic objective 1 and thematic objective 3. So this is basically competitiveness of SMEs. Which examples of unit costs are used as the way to calculate staff costs? 17-20 hours method, which comes from regulations. So this is off-the-shelf option. Then there is the rate per destination. So this is for travel and accommodation costs. And another interesting example, this is the costs connected to exhibit of an international fairs. So basically the unit cost is established as the fixed amount per square meter. And then depending on the overall square meters that are needed for this exhibition area, the costs for this activity are calculated. Are there any questions? Maybe my colleagues will help me to see if there are any in chat. Neither in Slido.
There are not questions in the chat, but there is the whole discussion on the eligibility of costs of SME owners, for example. So maybe afterwards we deal with that, but at the moment I can see that there is a question related to SCOs. Which is the method of calculation of lump sum and in which document you can find it?
Thanks for the question. So as I've started my presentation with, I will come back to this slide. There are different methods to establish the SCOs. First one was the off-the-shelf SCOs, so these are to be taken directly from regulations. And in regulations, there are no examples of off-the-shelf lump sums. There is only the example of the flat rate, which you know, 15 to 25% to calculate the amount for indirect costs. And there is also one unit cost off the shelf, which is 17-20 hours to calculate the hourly rate for staff costs. But when you talk about the lump sums, so if the program wants to establish amounts, this has to be either program-specific SCO, which means that the program needs to develop the methodology based either on the fair, equitable, and verifiable method, or based on a draft budget method. This is when it's the program-specific SCOs. And another type is exactly using this option, which I try to focus more on. It's copy-pasting SCOs. So basically taking the approach and the methodology, not only the amount of the lump sum, but also the methodology, proving the similarity for projects and beneficiaries for this programming period, and only then using the amount for the lump sum. So the lump sum, the simplified cost option is, according to some research, this is the least used SCO in all SC funds. But again, if you want to use it, you need to develop it yourself, basically, or to copy-paste from other union clauses, from other programs. Hope this answers the question. Any more questions? The topic about how to reimburse costs of natural persons, right? There was the whole discussion, and I think that it's a very good bridge to give the floor over to Bram. So Interreg Belgium Netherlands program, and Bram kindly agreed to talk about the example of unit cost from Horizon 2020. So Bram, over to you.
Julia, there is another one. There is another one. The methodology of calculating the lump sum has to be shared with audit authorities. Does it have to be shared with audit authorities?
So this is a topic about, it's a question that would lead to a discussion for another hours. Well, it's recommended that the methodologies for simplified cost options have to be assessed, have to be early assessed. So this is a so-called ex-ante assessment. This depends also how you are treating SCOs in your program. If you know, if now you look to the new regulations, the proposals, draft regulations, there is the annex to be submitted together with the cooperation program. And if you go to submission of this annex, there is the section which talks about SCOs, the description of the SCOs, and last point is talking exactly about the assessment. Was the SCOs assessed by the audit authority, and what was the conclusions? But the person who's asking about this question, we can share more information, I think, after the event or during the coffee break, because it takes a lot of time to reply properly.
So it was Davide Marciano, and
we'll take a note. We'll check during the.
If I can comment, there was a meeting still last December with the audit authorities and the Commission. And the audit authorities were not really enthusiastic about checking and approving, especially the lump sums, because it's a difficult task. But okay, we will discuss it in the break.
Okay, if no more questions, then Bram, over to you. Thank you. Maybe unmute yourself, or I will unmute you.
Sorry. Yes. Well, I do have a small, more practical question. You, in your slides, there were several examples of SCOs developed in programs. do you have, as Interreg, more data on these SCOs, just as inspiration? Is there, maybe I can imagine while making this inventory, that's, I don't know, for example, the fixed amount per square meter of exhibition area. Do you have more information like on the, maybe that would be interesting to share if you have it, of course.
So from these were examples of simplified cost options from the mainstream programs. So not from Interreg, but from the mainstream programs. There is a network of SCOs practitioners which is about mainstream programs from co-financed by ERDF and cohesion funds. And then these practitioners, they work and they share their experience on SCOs. They developed the very big Excel file where you can filter out and search for different types of SCOs based on different calculation methods, different beneficiaries that they cover, different TOs, etc., etc. So if you want, I've included this link in the bottom of this slide. So here you can see, and after the event, we'll share with you this presentation there. You can find it, or we'll also send it to you explicitly. So I've extracted only information on SCOs that is relevant to SMEs, but there's of course way more.
Okay, thank you.
And Julia, in the meantime, another question popped up. It's in the chat. Question: are the rates per destination fees the same as the ones used in E+? I think it's Erasmus+.
Erasmus+. Well, thanks for the question, but unfortunately I cannot answer this. To answer that, we need to go to this Excel file where the detailed methodology is described. So this is from Slovenia, and there you will find this information. Again, we can send you the link where to find this Excel file. But again, be careful with this copy pasting. You will know more details now when Bram talks about the unit cost, because there are certain requirements that have to be met. As I said, it's for similar types of projects and beneficiaries. Still currently in this programming, you have to keep an eye on the method, because whenever there are any updates happening to that method, you need to update it accordingly. And then, basically, yes. Okay, so Bram, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, this is about the question asked by Johanna in the chat, right? One of the biggest problems for NWE is the reimbursement of SME owners because they are not on the payroll of the organization. How is that done? Now, first of all, I'm not our program's expert on SCOs. So if it's getting really technical, I'll have to refer to Steph Peters, probably known by a lot of you. But what we're using, and I think, Julia, you have the slides now that we shared in advance, right? Oh, sorry. No, okay, then I'll...
We agreed that you would share it during presentation, but I can dig them out, of course, very fast.
No, I can look for them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly and now if I share my screen, I just have to. Yes. Is it? Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, so we have. Wait. Not sure if this is. If you can see this well now. These are the SCOs we are using, and I think what Johanna was asking for was owners of SMEs. So we are using a standard scale of unit costs for personnel costs. We've been using it for ages already, and I think it's the same methodology used in different programs, at least in the Benelux area and around the 1.2%. And then the third one on personnel costs, we are using the SME owners as used in the Horizon 2020 program in the priority objectives that are also about innovation. So they don't have to prove that they're working on R&D. The fact that these beneficiaries were selected within those priority axes means that we've checked on that. And then, since shortly we have a standard scale of unit cost for, that's to say, well, non-employees. There are, and this is why I said I'm not an expert on this, but we are using this for the different rare cases where there are people actually working for this company, but for example on a 0-hour rate or 0-hour scheme, and well, with these three we can actually cover all personnel costs. And then of course there's the flat rate, the fourth one. What I just wanted to mention, because you asked this in the chat, is that we are using these, but well, I think it would be best, any questions on how does it specifically work, can you cover everything, etc. I would probably have to refer to Steph for later on information. I don't know if that gives a start to an answer to your question, Johanna.
I think it does. I think my conclusion for the moment, the only answer that we have for those SME owners is the standard scale of unit cost. Or is there anything else that I'm not aware of? I'm looking towards.
No, sorry.
I mean, that's for me the only way that we have forward now.
No, the second one, these non-employees, in some cases, the owner is not an employee. He or she is not on the payroll. So you can't prove, number one. And number three, well, can also often not be usable. And then this second standard scale is sort of a catch-all for, well, the ones left over.
How I understand, I think, because I have talked to Steph before about this already, that my take on this was, because the definition of staff cost includes the being on the payroll, and that this aspect, which we ignore here, has never led to any doubt by auditors or the Commission. Am I correct in that? Because that's for me one of the biggest worries that I have at the moment. I say it fails the definition, therefore it's not eligible. Now, if we create a standard scale of unit cost, no matter what it is, I can say, okay, it's fine, even though in theory, if I have comparable, and that's something that I would have to look specifically into for our project, because we do have the innovation ones, but I wonder if there's also company owners outside the innovation. And then I wonder the comparability with Horizon again, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But at least that would be my logic for now.
Yeah, no, that's true. And
it is
maybe interesting to you is that we just, well, we're not finished yet, but we have had an audit by the Commission itself on our SCOs and the use of it. We don't have the final conclusions yet, but we have like the procedure of us responding to their first conclusions is now running, and it seems to be that the Commission overall says
it's fine.
All these different SCOs that are fine. Also the 0.7%, which is something, we just kind of made up and try to make it work. So once this EC audit is done, I can imagine it could be interesting to share those results, because then we have, it's an EC audit. It's not even just National Audit Authority.
Yeah. No, I knew, and we had previously exchanged about that, and I was waiting actually for the audit to be final to know the results of that, because I think this is indeed, it is very assuring if the Commission agrees to that. Then we have some more assurance to work towards solutions like that.
Yeah.
So thanks for being the guinea pig for us.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, Bram. Thanks a lot for this.
So if you can switch to the next slide. Okay, thank you. But before I start, I would like to tell you that we've got a community which is focused especially on state aid, and there is not much of a, let's say, inter exchange of ideas, but I put there quite a lot of important information. And for example, now we have the second phase of the consultation on GBER, Article 20, and others as well, but this is the most relevant one for us. And for example, I put there such important information when the consultation is open, when it's closed. So if you are interested in joining, I invite you to join this community. Okay, let's start with state aid projects with SMEs. Usually, but not always, the involvement of SMEs will mean that we have 5 state aid criteria met, and that we have to apply some state aid method. Especially the economic advantage is the most important one, and is the most relevant one, because the undertakings, the SMEs in this particular context, they are going to get an advantage, a benefit, which otherwise they would not obtain under normal market conditions. We are offering them a grant, and they are selected, and they get a benefit, they get an advantage, and therefore we have to apply some state aid approach. And we discussed that we have a general de minimis, that we have GBER. There is also agricultural block exemption regulation, and as we have heard, there are programs, for example, Estonia, Latvia, that had one project. I know about some other programs, but there are not many which use this agricultural block exemption regulation. There are fish and agricultural de minimis as well, and as a last resort, there is a notification procedure which was used by one of the programs, by Northwest Europe in this case, and it worked. Let's say it's also possible to notify to the Commission a state aid relevant project. But sometimes, of course, pilots or participation in trainings doesn't have to mean that there is an advantage. And to give you an example, the staff engagement, travels, all the effort that is so relevant to participate in the project is, and it is so much that the costs override the advantage. So the advantage condition would not be met in this particular example. And sometimes there are projects which decide, okay, there is no advantage, and therefore we say that this particular partner does not have an advantage, and therefore it doesn't meet the 5 state aid criteria. So therefore they are not state aid relevant, and we do not have to apply neither the de minimis, GBER, or some other approach. So it works like that. But of course, in majority of cases, as far as I have seen, normally state aid is applied. Some state aid approach is applied. Can we go to the next screen, to the next slide? And we were discussing today how the SMEs are participating in the project. So there is either direct participation, there are normal project partners. They can be sorry, the previous one, yeah, they can be project partners light or sub partners, as we have heard today. It's quite similar, such type of participation. And still there is another type of participation, indirect participation, and it is also called a downstream state aid or second level state aid. And as as Johanna mentioned before, state aid would be also applied in such cases, for example, a voucher scheme. And we should not forget about it, that we need to apply some state aid approach for all of these cases. So either GBER or de minimis. I will simplify a bit and will tell you that on one hand there is GBER, on the other hand there is de minimis. Can we go to next slide? Still, the voucher schemes. In Interreg, the voucher schemes are very typical for trainings or services provided to third parties. They can be SMEs. So there is a hierarchy. There is a program, there is a beneficiary or a partner, and the partner distributes let's say the vouchers or the final grants, whatever you call it, to third parties which are not participating in the project. So there is this possibility as well. And the final beneficiary is the one who takes the training course or benefits from the services, from the training services, from the some coaching services. There were projects like that. So there is another level of the project. There is a project partner, and still there are some SMEs involved. And this indirect participation is very often characterized by the fact that it's very low value. It's usually below 5,000 euros, but still 5 criteria are met. And these vouchers are distributed mainly as de minimis, but GBER is also possible. There was a question in ECN, State Aid Wiki, in other words, led by the Commission. It's a portal where you can ask questions to the Commission about state aid. And the Commission said that the application of Article 20 was possible. It was a positive answer, but no application in Interreg yet. So you can also apply GBER to such indirect participation to the vouchers. And can we go to the next slide? Yes, and I would like to, still the previous one? Yes, this one. And I would like to give you some examples of projects which had state aid relevant activities from Northwest Europe program. We have Johanna today, and therefore I chose Northwest Europe because my colleague, also other colleague from Northwest Europe program, Fabian, was helping us with the preparation of this presentation and other presentations on state aid. Therefore I chose this 3 particular projects. I will start with Biobase for SME. This is a typical voucher scheme that I was mentioning, and you can see that the project was about giving innovation coupons available up to 100,000 euros. There was a partner in Belgium who has actually a plant where you can transform the waste into something valuable. So you have, let's say, bio-based waste, and you can do something with it. There were whiskey factories which had a lot of waste, and they were transforming it, for example, this waste into pellet or something similar. But of course, this process costs. And the cost of transforming was given to the SMEs as a form of a voucher. They were receiving up to 100,000 euros. And the project partner was distributing these vouchers on a basis of de minimis. So the participating SMEs needed to provide the de minimis declaration, how much de minimis they received before, and afterwards they received a letter how much de minimis was granted to them finally. And what I wanted to stress, and this was the question was asked today as well, that previously the program didn't know how much is going to be spent on these vouchers. There was only a draft calculation. There was only an assumption how many vouchers would be spent. So, for example, let's say 20 vouchers, and each voucher is 100,000 euro or up to 100,000 euros. So the budget for this was blocked. The program would block 2 million euros for this voucher scheme. So it works like that. You do not have to provide the very exact amount beforehand at the project applications stage. There were still some other projects which had state aid relevant activities and fiber sort. In fiber sort, in this project, the SMEs were project partners, and they were applying both de minimis and GBER articles, some GBER articles, Article 25 in this particular project. But the program did not allow to mix de minimis and GBER. There was the only possibility was to have either GBER or de minimis. From my point of view, it's much simpler. There were programs who tried to mix different approaches per partner, and it was very difficult, because if you mix Article 20, which is 50% of maximum intensity rate, and another article, for example 25, where you can get up to 80% of intensity rate, then it's very difficult to monitor how much was spent on the project, how much was spent on the partner, which activities can be attributed to Article 20, which activities can be attributed to Article 25, for example, and the monitoring of such a project becomes a nightmare. And I have heard recently from regional programs which went for this option as well, so mixing different GBER articles, that it's very difficult then to manage such a project. And the person from the regional program said that the majority of time was spent on checking the activities, and not even the activities, the single unit costs, the unit items, the single unit items, in order to say whether the particular activity was Article 20 or Article 25. And still there is another project within Northwest Europe program, integrating tidal energy into the European grid, where SMEs were performing services, and they were working on the exploration of sea and the power of sea. So they were transforming the power of waves into energy. It was a pilot project, and here as well, Article 25 and de minimis were applied. Okay, can we now, I would like to now check with you whether in your programs you applied either de minimis or GBER. So I give you 1-2 minutes to answer, to vote, and I would like to see whether in your programs or in your projects, if you are from projects, whether you had de minimis or whether you had GBER. So you can do it in Slido, of course. This
yes, so we are using Slido. Please take your phones. You have activated question there already.
Okay, so from what I can see at the moment is that de minimis is winning. 94% used de minimis, but also 65% use GBER. The amount is not 100% because there are programs which used both de minimis and GBER, but I wanted to check with you whether you have some experience with these two different approaches, GBER and de minimis. And I can see that, well, the majority has the experience with de minimis, 94%. And there is still GBER with 65%, and there are programs that did not use any of this. So there is 6% of the people who said that the program did not use any of these approaches. Okay, I wanted to check it with you whether you know the articles of GBER, because from what I can see, the future is going to be mainly about GBER. Mainly about GBER. Why? First of all, well, the de minimis, the current de minimis regulation is going to be prolonged. It's going to expire by the end of 2020. From what I heard, but it was heard through the grapevine, it will be prolonged by 2 years, but it's not a confirmed fact. There is no regulation yet, so I cannot take it for granted that it will be 2 years. Maybe it will be 1 year, maybe it will be 3 years. What I can, however, tell you is that there was a fitness check of the de minimis regulation. So the Commission was checking if de minimis is still relevant, if the amount of 200,000 or 100,000 for transport sector is enough, and whether de minimis as such is a useful tool. So this fitness check might bring some changes for the future regulation. It might bring, not necessarily, I don't know whether it will be changed or not, but from what we heard from the Commission, from DG Competition, they are very flexible and open, for example, to increase the amount of 200,000. They are open for such ideas as creating one joint register for de minimis, because as we have experienced, there were some member states which have the registers, and for the programs it was quite difficult to get access to these registers. It created some challenges. I call it like this. And what I tell you at the very beginning, that there is a consultation of amended GBER article, which includes Article 20. It's still a draft. It's a second draft already. There is a second consultation which is open until July. But already now I can tell you, and I can see it very optimistic, because the Commission has heard the programs. They almost put all our requests in the draft, and it meets our let's say our request, the draft. It's designed especially for ETC programs. You can see it from, for example, from the eligibility catalog in the Article 20, which is the same as the eligibility catalog in financial regulation 481, including the SCOs. So if you apply the Article 20, you can also have SCOs in the project. What is very positive is that the new draft does not distinct between large, medium-sized or small companies. The article is open for all, not only for SMEs as it used to be. It's open for large companies. And so what it means that no SME check is needed anymore, because we have one maximum 8 intensity, which is optimized with maximum co-financing rate. The draft regulation, the draft GBER regulation, makes reference to the ETC regulation. So when we know the final co-financing rates for the new programs, the maximum 8 intensities will be the same, which is very positive. Because the current GBER, current Article 20, was offering us only up to 50%, which was not enough, and there were many applicants who didn't want to hear about this article, because the proposed maximum 8 intensity was too low. It was only 50%. And here I would like to make a point as well. Maximum 8 intensity, what does it mean? Because it's not equal to co-financing rate. Maximum 8 intensity means that you can that the rest, for example, you have public and private, and if you have from public 50%, the rest must be covered from private funds. So in this case, in the future, the ERDF will be the only possible public source. Let's say it will be 75%. I don't know how much it's going to be, but if it's 75%, the rest will have to be covered with the private funds. I think it's clear. Well, the rest sometimes were covered with the public funds. The own co-financing was covered with the public funds, and there were some inventions, like, for example, there was a regional scheme in the Netherlands to support projects. The same was in Italy, that the projects were getting 10-15% of the public funds. In this case, it won't be possible, but I think for the SMEs and even for the large companies, getting so much as we offer, 75-85%, is a real advantage, because on the EU market, let's say on the EU subsidies market, normally the companies do not get that much. They get 50%, sometimes 30%, sometimes 20%, even from the public funding. The rest must be provided from the private fund. So this is a real advantage, and I think it's going to well, the companies are going to participate also because of that. Not only that the projects are attractive, but also the maximum 8 intensity will attach many. And the threshold is going to be the same as it used to be. It's going to be 2 million per undertaking per project. I'm going almost to finish. There is one important information to tell you, and this is referred to the voucher schemes and to the indirect state aid that I mentioned at the beginning. There is a new GBER Article 20A, which offers limited amounts of aid of 20,000 per undertaking per project. What it means that, for example, you have a voucher scheme and you can grant up to 20,000 per undertaking, and you do not have any reporting obligations because the regulation says that they do not have to be applied. You do not have to provide neither the Annex 2 nor the annual report is not needed. And the documentation, as you know, the documentation normally for the normal projects you need to keep, for the normal projects which have state aid activities, you need to keep for 10 years. And this specific requirement will not be applied to projects with Article 20A. So I think that it's quite a positive message from the Commission, because they listened to our requests for the last that we provided to the Commission for the last 10 years. It's not last year only, but we were complaining, let's say, to the Commission for the last 10 years. And finally, there is something which is not maybe the total exclusion of ETC programs from the state aid regimes, which we wanted to achieve, but it was impossible because we would have to change the treaty. But there is something substituting. It should be easy to apply this article. And personally, I was working in a program and I was applying GBER as well, and it's not that time consuming. So you can, I think that the programs can use that. The consultation is still open. It closes on the 6th of July, as I said. And the Commission plans to publish the final version of this amendment of the regulation at the end of this year. We'll see. They had some slight delay of 3 months, but hopefully it will be ready for the start of the new projects, because I heard some programs want to start already in March 2021 with the first calls. That's all from my side. Any questions?
Yes, I would like to ask a question.
Please.
Thank you very much, Przemysław, for a very interesting presentation. I would like to come back to the last slide about Article 20A of the GBER and the amount of 20,000 euros, which is proposed in the second version. Do you have any feedback and information from the Commission? Why is it 20,000? What is the rationale behind the amount of 20,000? Why it's not any different amount, like 50,000 or 200,000, for example?
So we were discussing this, and there was a consultation. The first amount was 5,000 euro, but we considered and we responded to the Commission that it's not enough, and the Commission agreed to 20,000. I think it's also taken from the statistics that we sent to the Commission, and we were showing on average how much all these voucher schemes are, and this would be the average. I know that it's not much, but still for this third level participation, it's enough. And remember that you have Article 20, which is very attractive for the project partners, because they can get the amount of the same amount as the other partners are getting. So I think with the Article 20 and Article 20A, we can somehow manage. There was.
Yes, I was just trying to. My first guess was: is it connected with financing of small projects or preparatory projects or seed money projects, for example? No.
No. It's not connected. It's a completely different calculation and a different story. And Davide asked, is Interreg going to prepare comments to the GBER draft? Yes, we are going to prepare the comments to the GBER draft. There is a specific state aid working group which is dealing with that. I think next week I should receive the comments from the programs which are participating. From the very first look that I had and these comments that I received up till now, the programs are very content with what we have in the Article 20. And also, I suppose, because the member states were asking me about the comments to the GBER draft, there will be some comments from the member states as well, I believe. Could we share the comments? I'm going to prepare a final document, a final paper, the same as the first one that we published. I think in 2 weeks' time, you are going to have this document. I'm going to put it on our website because the member states, again, were asking me about this document. So it's going to be within 2 weeks' time.
Okay, so I didn't see any questions in Slido, neither in chat when it comes to state aid. So thanks, Przemek, and I think we can move to the last content-related session for today, of today's event. And we've been talking already a lot about different programs approaches, different management models and schemes that they use to attract and to engage more and more SMEs in their programs. So I think now it's a good time and opportunity to listen to actually what do they say. What is the experience of SMEs with Interreg programs and projects?
And Julia, do you allow me a brief technical remark?
Yes, please.
It's just because colleagues from SMEs might not know that we record this meeting. So in case you do not want to appear, please switch off your cameras. That's just a brief technical reminder to you so that you're aware of that we will record.
Thank you, Bernhard. Thanks.
And as we can see, we have Barta Balázs, Robert Nemet, and Renata Csabai from the Pan on Business Network Association from Hungary, and Olga Czubrik and Trin Kabin. I hope that I pronounced it right. Okay. Hello. From the project TBD Biodiscovery from Estonia.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us today and taking the time to attend our online event. I hope that many of you have had a chance to check the recorded video we've done with Robert, Barta, and Renata, where they presented their proud experience with Interreg programs, both of cross-border character and of the transnational character. And I'd like to start this virtual discussion maybe with the warm-up question, which would be the role of Interreg in the achievement of your organization's mission and vision. So how did you come across Interreg, and how did Interreg project help you in doing what you do? So please, maybe I'll give the floor first to Robert and Barta, and then to Trin and Olga.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Just a small clarification, my first name is Balázs and the family name is Barta, but that's a technical detail.
I'm sorry.
That's no problem, I know it's confusing. So basically we are from Western Hungary, and I don't know if you could follow the presentation. We have a very special situation in a sense that we are in a cross-border area where there is the biggest economic performance difference across the border. So it's, we are next to Austria, which is 10 kilometers from here. They are extremely advanced, and we are in the convergent region as Hungary. And we have some challenges in cross-border SME actions. So one of the bottlenecks is the not sufficient number of SMEs in the area. And the second one is not enough supporting institutions. So what we do in the area is that we always look for partners across the border with whom we can supply jointly technological supply to the companies. So we have our own infrastructure that we have built, and we are an RTO organization, or digitalization technologies, and we have about 150 customers nationally. And what we do with the Austrian partners is that we put together a portfolio of laboratories and digital devices that we can service the companies together, and we service with a service level agreement, hopefully by the end of this year, and 5 of us to companies. And what we also do is that we can access each other companies through the system of our local representatives. So it's a network of digital innovation hub that we have set up together. And how we operate on top of that, we have the local operation, then we have the cross-border operation for digital services, then we have Central European and Danube regional operation for joint lobby with the policymakers and teaching each other. And then we use Interreg Europe Fund to have a wider spectrum of what's going on in Scandinavia and Spain, and sometimes to see future trends. So basically, this is how we operate. I'm the managing director. Renata could not be with us, and Robert, my colleague, is responsible for financials, and he's expert on all those staff calculation costs and financial services.
Thank you very much, Paulus, which we, of course, are going to cover a little bit later. And I really very much liked in the video that we've done together that you mentioned that Interreg, you perceive it as a platform and a tool for learning, and also depending on the level of the Interreg that you're involved with, you can establish different types of alliances, like the Operation Alliance, the Knowledge Alliance, and the Policy Alliance. So the Interreg community is really an opportunity for the project beneficiaries to learn and to share the experiences. Trin, Olga, do you share the same opinion? What is the role of Interreg in your organization?
Well, thank you very much for inviting us here. Actually, this project which we have just finalized, it was already, I think, the second cross-border project for us, because I think the first Estonian-Latvian project by us was performed in, if I'm not mistaken, in 2011, 2013, something like this. At that time, we have worked closely with one Latvian pharmaceutical company, Grindex. It is a big company, because at that time we were a very small organization, I would say like a micro business, and Latvians, they were like a big business. Then I guess the rules were changed, that it wasn't anymore possible to have like a Latvian counterpart who is coming from a big business. But fortunately, I mean, yeah, it's you know, it's like a typical for our area that in reality there is only 1 million people living in Estonia, and there is only 2 million people living in Latvia. So if you can see, yeah, Estonia is proud to be the country with highest concentration of startups. That's true, really. But in reality, when you are seeking for a reliable partner, it's not so easy, because indeed there are quite a lot of startups, but it's not much of established organization which already have track and which already have financial stability and everything. So definitely we were very interested to participate in the second Interreg project as well. And you know, we and I think there were a lot of advertisements and people knew about this project. So for example, I was contacted by different companies. I mean, we ourselves were coming from biotech and pharmaceutical area, and we were contacted by very different companies from Latvia to go together for some projects, to apply for a project. But to say frankly, I didn't know them very well, and as far as I tried to Google it out, I found that not all of them were very like financially stable organization, or they were not I mean, the idea was not very clear to me, and I wanted to have like a very clear idea. And at that time, well, as you know, it's again, it's like a for our area, it's very typical that southern Estonia, in reality, yes, we cooperate very much with northern Latvia. Historically, we are very close, even though the countries are different. But you know, Tallinn is our capital. This is like more far away for us than Riga. It's funny, but this is like this. And since 2010, we had another partner in Latvia. It was also a small company called Farmedia. We have been cooperating with them, yes, since 2010. And both ways, sometimes we were the customer and we have obtained some services from Farmedia, and sometimes we have developed one active pharmaceutical ingredients for Farmedia, which they then sold very successfully to a Dutch partner. And so we knew them very well. It was a very good partner for us because we knew that they are financially stable, they have like a clear business model. And then we just met together and in 2016 and made like a brainstorming to understand if there are any chances to go for Interreg project together. And then we have came up with the idea about this PET precursor, which is like a chemical compound used for positron emission tomography. Basically, it's like a cancer diagnostics. And when it started, we decided to apply together for this project. So I think that the most important of my topic is that, you know, it's really important to find the right partner. And we were very lucky to find it, yeah.
Great experience. Thanks a lot for this. Let's move on to a second question, and I think that we have a very nice occasion here of the private partner being part of different Interreg programs. So a question to Balázs and Robert: which areas require, in your opinion, better coordination and harmonization among Interreg programs? Also, Robert, in one of the slides and the recommendations for simplification, you managed the harmonized financial rules. Maybe you can give us some examples what you mean.
And first of all, thank you so much for the question. We were discussing it in the team, how to approach that. And what we have thought that would be important for us, that we don't talk about one project which lasts 18 months or 24 months, but we can implement a program. And if we want to implement a program, it consists of various projects. We have to know that they complete each other and complementary to each other. And we have different objectives with all funding, structural funds, bilateral and multilateral funds. And if it's perceived positively during the evaluation procedure, that it's not just a one-time shot that we would like to satisfy with that project with the partners, but we have an ongoing 1 decade of experience of working together. And this is how it complements to other activities that we are doing with them on different layers. It would be very beneficial for us to make some more predictability in the future about such actions. So if we have a heritage of work, a tradition of working together, it was positively judged, and then we know how it goes up in the future, and it has some kind of extra evaluation benefit. It would help us to make sustainable partnerships. Among the various programs, yeah. So.
Thank you, Balázs. Robert, anything else to add about the financial rules harmonization?
Yes, thank you. As in my presentation, I mentioned there were a lot of steps made by Interactive, mainly after the end of the previous period, and a lot of simplification options has been introduced, and it's really great. And I know that you are you are continuing this thing, and it's really welcomed. And I think in the next questions are referring to staff costs, so I would skip that and jump to other areas like those simplified options that you already mentioned earlier this morning. It's really good opportunities. One thing is, for example, the output-based financing. So when you are not financing activities by detailed report, but you are checking the outputs and financing a kind of lump sum for different activities. And it's already introduced in Interreg Europe in the 4th core for the phase 2 activities. So it is the first evidence, but we are looking forward to see other options and also transnational and cross-border projects. Also, it's a possibility to reduce the administration in the travel cost when it's possible to have some kind of lump sum, like in Erasmus. It's already mentioned earlier this morning. And yes, on the external expertise, I think the output-based financing can be a solution to reduce the administration.
Yes, thanks. And how about the lump sums? Do you perceive that as the riskier simplified cost option or not? Because quite often we hear from programs that the beneficiaries say that the lump sum is quite risky. Because of course, this is sort of the binary approach, 1-0. So if the output is delivered, then there are finances. And if not, then there is no payment, basically. What would you say? Is it too risky, or if it's well defined and everything is clear, then it's perfectly fine?
Well, you know, it's quite a new thing in Interreg. It's known in Horizon, for example. It's hard to decide on that. Maybe if it's a bigger task, it should be divided into separate subtasks and make some internal evaluation, midterm evaluation, maybe accept partial results. But in terms from the program's perspective, we must understand that it's very important for the program to get the results. So if the beneficiary like us don't provide the results, then that's a 0 in the binary game.
Then it's fair not to have the payment. Okay, thanks for this. Maybe the question now to Dean and Olga. Do you have any experience with SCOs? Have you worked in your projects with the simplified cost options?
With what, sorry?
Do you have any experience with the simplified cost options in your project?
Simplified cost options.
Mm-hmm.
We actually don't have in the program.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
There is only lump sum for preparation costs, 5,000 euros, and then the flat rate for administrative costs.
Yeah, flat rate for administrative costs.
Yeah, that's the only. So the basic rules are the same for all the project beneficiaries, regardless of the legal type. Yeah. And this lump sum or this unit cost that, let's say, some products are developed over 2 or 3 years, and they're also reporting. And if the product or this project output is one product, jointly developed product or service, then it comes only in the very end of the project. Usually there is nothing basically in between. You don't report like really 0.3 is developed now, or maybe at some stages, but usually SMEs are reporting for us like in the very end that okay, now it's done, now it's really achieved.
Are you planning to develop any SCOs in the future program?
In general, yes. Not so specific yet, but maybe something specifically for SMEs, but in principle, yeah. Early days, but we are considering. Yeah.
Good plans. Okay. Do we have any questions from participants? Let me check slide.
I do not see any, but I would like to ask the same question to the Hungarian colleagues. What do you think of SCOs, and would you like to see more of them in the future?
Yeah, definitely, yes. We were really happy with the SCOs introduced in 2014. So we are looking forward for further opportunities, also as an option. So maybe have the choice to choose between, let's say, activity financing, output-based financing, or other SCOs. Yes.
Thank you. Let's see for more questions.
I would also have a question. Because as Till mentioned that it's a bit the impression that when you come as an SME to such programs, the jargon, the way people working for the programs look at things might be very strange. Or at least when you come with your entrepreneurial spirit, it might sound quite often very strange what the people working for programs tell you. And a simple question to the colleagues from the SMEs. What was your experience upon first contact with the programs? Was it really a strange world, or did you somehow, what was things which struck you first?
When we look at our customers, we never say project. We always talk about the topic. That, for example, there's an opportunity if they are interested in metal 3D printing, then we can start working together with them, with a partner in Wiener Neustadt, who are extremely experienced. And if we are lucky, we can have, let's say, 50% cost reduction. Or you can have an opportunity to meet them free of charge. And when they are there, of course, they sign the paper, they listen to some introductory presentation about the project itself, but we always avoid. It's not because we are shy or ashamed of working for an EU project. It's just, as you mentioned, to avoid any kind of prejudice about that. And then we always translate. And it's a big challenge in our team, actually, because half of our team is economists and the other half is engineers. And it's also in-house an issue when they talk to each other and they say, we don't understand what you say, even if it's the same language. So you can imagine how extrapolate it to the customer base. So we always have to focus very much on simplification of all the terms that we use. That's for sure.
Thanks, and maybe Olga, Trin, what is your experience of the first contact with the program?
The first contact with the program, I don't know, maybe Trin can describe it.
Yes, that was my first time to deal with that kind of program, and our project was already started when I joined. So at the beginning it was very difficult for me to understand all the programs and possibilities, but our secretariat contact was always very helpful for all the questions, and it made everything quite easy for me.
Very good, that's very pleasant to hear. What would you say was the biggest challenge in implementing the Interreg project?
You know, I think the biggest challenge is still like we're setting up the communication between the partners so that all the information is available when we need it, because, you know, we're not like big companies, but still there are different departments, and there are still like management and the Department of Analytical Chemistry and Department of Production. So I think the success of this project really depends on how efficiently you can manage the communication between different departments, not only in your organization, but also for example, in the partner organization. So if you are sending the email and, for example, no answer is coming, so you have to call and set up different Skype calls. And I think this is, so this is not exactly, I mean, this is in every project, not only in a kind of cooperation, but I think that's why, and also what is also important is that, you know, from the beginning, you understand what are not only their salaries and costs, but also what kind of investments are you going to do using this program, because we have bought different things, purchased different things, like, for example, flash chromatography system, which is absolutely needed. And our partner, also this Latvian company, in the beginning they had one idea, and then they decided that in order to somehow, I mean, the product what we are producing, it has to be produced in an extremely clean area where all kind of microbiology impurities are totally, you have to get rid of any kind of impurities. And in the beginning they had like one technical specification, and in the end it was changed, so we had to change it. So these things have to be clear, and so you have to have the contact with your partner like all the time. Possibly not only every week, but maybe several calls per week, so that when you can really monitor the budget, how the budget is used, and what is your partner is doing. So I think this is the most important.
Thanks for this. Thanks. And maybe the last question from me, and if there are no more questions from participants, we will close this session. But the question to Balázs, please, and maybe outlooks for the future. Are you planning any further Interreg projects in the future, provided the Interreg programs are there?
Oh yeah, we always try to be very strategy oriented. So what we do is we've just went through all the European strategic documents from 21 to 27 documentation and the 1924. To understand the language, to understand the objective, the scope of that. And we know that within our organization, within our digital innovation hub, we want to move from 3D printing, collaborative robotics, and so on, much more to application of those fields, which means now in a trendy words, artificial intelligence. And then we look at what is the way of moving in that. So how to move towards health sector, how to orient ourselves towards smart cities and make strategies, alliances. And it's definitely a wish from us to continue as we did in the last 1.5 decades. And honestly, I don't know whom to have to say that, but we are very happy to be partner in that program, Interreg program. It's extremely beneficial for us. It's a huge learning opportunity.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. I think that this contributions bring a lot of interesting insights for all Interreg programs that are here. Thanks also for taking the time and joining us today. And we hope to see you in the future projects with us. If there are no more questions for now, then I will give the floor to Przemek for the closing remarks.
Well, before still we go to the next session, I would like to say that it was very beneficial, your participation for us, the programs, because sometimes we do not have this feedback with projects. We are preparing something, you know, it's already the 3rd time that we do it, and it's going to be the same, you know, the preparation, but this feedback is very beneficial. And we need to have this feedback with the projects. It's very important for us. And there is one thing that I wanted to mention, which was very crucial, that the Estonian colleagues mentioned: the communication with the partners. It's the same for the programs. The programs must communicate not only with the program bodies, but also with the beneficiaries. It's one of the main stakeholders in the program, beneficiaries. And for Robert and Bolas, I think the most interesting point was one of the slides in your presentation, what we need to change in the future programs, because as I said, sometimes we are preparing something only for us and we do not think about the beneficiaries. So I think it was a very relevant point, and we are glad that the programs are not so bad and you are going to still participate in the future in the future perspective, because of course the programs are prepared for you, they are not prepared for us. Thank you. Now it's time to finish, but we would like you to fill in the evaluation forms. It's very important for us because it's a new type of event, and we do not know what the feedback is going to be. If we need to change something, if it was okay, if you liked it or not. I know that there was no lunch. Sorry for that. We cannot do that, but maybe there are some other things that you want to mention that you liked or you didn't like that we need to change. So the evaluation form is going to be, yes, it's now in the chat. Julia sent the link, so just click this link and it will lead you directly to the evaluation form. From my side, thank you to all of you, to the programs and to the projects who participated. Also, big thanks to the speakers. I think it was very beneficial, and even though we are in this virtual world, it worked quite well. I liked it a lot. Even the discussions at the beginning, I was not very I was not very optimistic if it was going to work or not, but it did, and it worked really well. So please fill in the evaluation forms, and one more time, big thanks to all of you.
Thank you for organizing.
Likewise, big thanks from me too, and from all of us. Maybe still few words for the wraps up. while you are finishing or opening the evaluation forms. So once again, since this was the recorded event, we will publish the recordings also on the website if you'd like to come back to it later to check out some moments maybe. And so we will publish also the presentation that we were sharing throughout the event. So also you'll be able to follow all the links that might be interesting for you. We will try to summarize all the questions that we received throughout the event from both chat and from Slido, and then we will try to do like the Q&A paper, trying to answer on all the questions posed. Once again, the reminder for the communities. So as Przemek mentioned, we have the state aid community. So we do for the SCOs. So we have the Interreg SCOs community. If you'd like to be part of those communities, if you'd like to join, you can write directly to Przemek to join state aid community. And if you'd like to join SCOs community, please write to me, contact me, and we will add you to those communities. And once again, as Bernhard mentioned, we would try to do short fact sheets where we'll describe the management models of some Interreg programs when it comes to engagement of SMEs. If there are any questions, please go ahead, ask now. Otherwise, that's it for me. Bernhard, if you want to say something, I see you unmuted yourself, so you are prepared to.
Just big thanks to all of you that it happened. So
yes.
From an very initial thought, I think way back last year now, that we were able to do it. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, and please fill in the evaluation form. This is important for us. Otherwise, we do many events now online, so if you're interested to join other events, please go ahead and check it on our website under events. There are also many new videos and publications. You will find all of that in our library. And otherwise, if you have any questions, please feel free always to contact us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.